Welcome back everybody to another episode of Direct Comparison. In today's episode, we're
Ya şimdi olan şey olmuyor demek biraz ayıp. Tamam, bütün 20 dakika boyunca gösterdim bir sürü şey ama az önce benim gözümle elimle oynadığım sahne yok diyor herif yani şimdi. O da olmadı yani.
take an early look at the highly anticipated Dying Light 2 and complete missions, collect these, the latter of which. Assisting it further is the brilliant day-night cycle that transforms the relatively tame wide range of players carries the original 2016 title Dying Light. For those of you unfamiliar with this series, Dying Light is a first-person, narrative-driven action-adventure game where players complete missions, collect loot, and fight hordes of unique zombies using a wide range of weapons and parkour abilities, the latter of which helps to greatly set it apart from other, more conventional zombie-bashing adventures. Assisting it further is the brilliant day-night cycle that transforms the relatively tame gameplay experience during the daytime into a heart-pounding nightmare once the sun sets. Fast forward to today, and now we have the long-awaited sequel, Dying Light 2, that promises to build upon its largely popular formula with a brand new narrative, expanded parkour systems, and even more deadly late-night strolls. There's a ton to get through here, so let's break things down by first taking a look at the presentation. For reference, both games are being played on a PC, with the graphics set to their highest settings at a native 4K resolution. However, options like motion blur, chromatic aberration, and film grain will be disabled in order to provide cleaner image capture. It will actually be addressed by release via a day one patch. Alright, so let's kick things off by first looking at some character models. Now, as this is a first-person game, the main character models themselves are not technically visible, at least not when playing in single-player mode. But the various miscellaneous characters, on the other hand, have seen a big boost to their fidelity in the sequel, with vastly superior facial geometry, more complex animations, and better interaction with various environmental light sources. You can also make out more fine details with each character, like individual hairs in their beards or the fine stitching in each of the outfits being worn. It's not necessarily revolutionary, as the models still have a sort of stylized look to them, but it's a big step forward from.
Dur bakayım, chatten bir arkadaş farklı bir video atmış. Ulan herifin kanalı verified, 600.000 abonesi var, 5.000 izlenmiş video. Nasıl oluyor bu işler? Nasıl kanal lan bu? Herif GTA 5 videoları atmış. 22 milyon, 9 milyon, 9 milyon, 3 milyon, 4 milyon. Oo. Vay vay vay. Hadi bakalım, sonumuz benzemesin. Gerçi benim hayatımda en çok izlenmiş videom 1 milyon da. Bayağı zombi kanal lan. Allah kurtarsın kral. Neyse bak, 150.000 izletmiş geçen ay bir tane. Tamam abi, Dying Light 2'yi gösterdim bu ne ha? Oyundan çok daha tatmin ediciydi Dying Light 1 ya. Ama Dying Light 1'de elindeki silah çok güçlü bir silah bu arada. Dying Light 2'de level 1 silahla vuruyor. Burada hayvan gibi kılıç almış eline. Biraz onun da etkisi var. Gerçi oyunun sonu olmuştu. Hala elimdeki en güçlü silahla tek vuruşta kesemiyordum ben sokaktaki düz zombileri. O mesela kombatlarda canımı sıkamamıştı gerçekten.
The original game nonetheless. The various zombies have also been improved in this regard. There's more variety in the default biter enemy types, for example, so you won't see as many clones walking side by side like you did before. However, the one thing that I feel might be a step back here are the animations. The zombies move just fine on their own, but I found that the great ragdoll effects of Dying Light 1 don't seem to be functioning as consistently in the sequel.
Öyle.
Kicking a zombie off a roof, for example, doesn't cause them to tumble off the roof like before, but instead, they seem to fall off like a Looney Tunes character, pausing in the air for a second before their ragdoll effect kicks in and then drops them straight down.
İlk oyundaki kadar
Kicking
temiz
zombies
çalışmıyor
into these
gerçekten.
spiked barriers demonstrates a similar issue, where the zombies no longer seem to get stuck on the spikes, but instead fall straight down on the ground after touching the spikes, as if someone flipped a 1 to a 0. According to
Valla
Techland, this is
oynanış
something that will likely be
tatmin
patched
ediyor
with
diyen
later
bütün
quality of
arkadaşlar
life
için galiba
improvements, but we'll just have to wait and
oynanış
see if this
birinci
issue
oyunda beni de daha
persists
çok
in the
tatmin
final
ediyordu
release
ya.
build. Next up, we have the level environments. Dying Light 2's environment is a major change-up from what players experienced in Dying Light 1. In Dying Light 1, players explored a fictional interpretation of the Turkish city-state Iran, which had just been exposed to a deadly zombie plague and was then subsequently
Turkish'te de
sealed off
arkadaşlar
from
as
the rest of the
bayrakları.
world to help contain it. This game world is composed of two major locations, separated by loading screens. The starting area is the slums, a large favela-style location located along the shore, with lots of variable elevation and small interconnected residential areas. Once the player has progressed far enough, they can then travel to the more established Old Town district, which is a far more dense city area with lots of tall structures and gridlocked city streets. Both locations offer a vast playground that takes full advantage of the game's unique parkour mechanics, with things like narrow, tightrope cables stretch over buildings, ramps, obstacles to slide and vault over, and several clearly marked blue objects like piles of trash that players can jump onto for a quick descent from a high building. Along with this is the game's expansion location, the countryside, that offers a wide open, flat valley to explore, built to take advantage of a new vehicle mechanic. Dying Light 2, on the other hand, takes place in an entirely fictional location called Villador. Villador appears to be some sort of post-apocalyptic take on an unknown European city, where the few remaining survivors have rebuilt society on the rooftops, while the zombie threat continues to loom down on the streets. The result of this presents obstacles to jump on and off of that weren't in the first game. Players can now swing from monkey bars, long ropes, and will even need to counterbalance long beams to help reach high platforms. It's a more dynamic sandbox this time around, and the addition of rooftop gardens adds a really unique style to it all. As far as the quality goes, Dying Light 2 also sees a big uptick to the amount of detail on and above its many city streets. Texture maps have been upgraded across the board, with 4K textures being used for things like building surfaces and the ground.
Elbette.
Additionally, the great flowing tall grass sprite effect previously introduced in Dying Light 1's Following DLC has returned, and can be seen along many rooftops, and even serve a critical role as a new hiding place for players. Then there's the downtown area, the second major area in the game, accessible after progressing
Downtown
further in the
alanında
story,
halat ata gitmenin
and
keyfi
without the
de
need for any apparent loading screens either.
ilk oyunda yok işte.
The downtown area is gigantic, with much taller buildings on average than anything we saw in Dying Light
Buranın
1.
içerisinde halat atıp paraşüt gitmenin tadını ilk oyunda alamamıştım hiç. Ama şimdi post game'de bütün zombileri ekstra güçlendirmişler falan. Ne yapacağım yani endgame'de bundan sonra bilmiyorum. Oyunu %70'i civarında bırakıp açık şehri yani şey çok kötü ya. Oyunun %70'i civarında Downtown'u keşfetmek, oradan oraya iple şeyle savrulmak, bugünkü yayının başındaki nokta. Çok keyifliydi. Şimdi roket atılmış falan bir halde yani. Yani oyunu en keyifli halinde bırakmayı becerememişler ha.
Now, this is an area where I'm a bit conflicted. One of the aspects that I feel the first Dying Light really nailed was the general color grading of its game world. While the lighting techniques at play weren't necessarily the best out there, the world still felt incredibly natural and realistic, with lighting that felt genuinely dark and terrifying once the sun set. Dying Light 2, however, has a slightly less realistic tone to it. The lighting is brighter and more vibrant, accentuating the gorgeous rooftop gardens by really bringing out all the green and yellow. But at the same time, it seems to take away a bit from the original's more horror-oriented tone. I think the best example of this is when the sun sets across the environment. In Dying Light 1, the game world gets extremely dark. So dark that turning off the flashlight will make it literally impossible to see what's directly in front of the player. The moonlight does eventually come out and illuminate more of the environment to help navigate. But even then, turning a corner into an alley without a light is pretty much a death sentence. Dying Light 2 does still provide this level of darkness to some extent. However, Villador has this sort of blue-violet glow when the sun sets that keeps the world from reaching that pitch-black level of the original game. Once you're on the actual streets below, it's a different story. A flashlight is once again required to navigate efficiently, and turning the wrong corner or venturing inside without it is ill-advised. Even still, Dying Light 2 on average has a much brighter tone to it that appears to be more of a stylistic choice than anything else. This is even more apparent when considering the much more advanced lighting techniques at play here. With the help of NVIDIA's RTX technology, Dying Light 2 features some really impressive lighting effects. It causes light to bounce on nearby objects, and ray-traced reflections, which can be easily observed when object shading and self-shadowing, along with ray-traced, in this case, gore effects that have been retained with the sequel, and expanded slightly with an increase to particle effects and general consistency relative to the weapon that the player uses. In fact, particle effects are probably the area with the most additions here. There's a ton of particles incorporated into everything, from new zombie types to environmental decor like flies buzzing around piles of bodies in the street, or other colored particles from unique plants and player buffs. This seems to go hand in hand with the game's new stylistic approach to the art design, with more color being incorporated to give the game an almost fantastical feel. Other effects like water simulation, fire, and explosions haven't really been overhauled all too much. There's still some
Ben vallahi her Steam indirimi olduğunda Dying Light 1'i öven birisi olarak şimdilik Dying Light 1'i övmeye devam edeceğim galiba ya. Öyle gözüküyor.